information, and we need to figure out how to respond to what's going on, and so Scott's going to try to help us do that. And so I want to thank Crossroads for allowing us to be able to do this, and so I'd like to say a prayer before we start here, and then we'll welcome Scott to come. So if you'll join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you so much, first of all, for our Lord Jesus Christ. Lord, thank you for the sacrifice you made for us and for the freedom that comes from you, and secondly, for this great nation that is founded upon freedom. And we know it is established through your word, and we just pray that we can be a part of keeping freedom alive in America. We pray for your blessing upon this session tonight as we meet together. We pray for your blessing on Scott as he speaks, and help us have understanding on how that we can make a difference. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Everybody said, amen. So Scott Heiner is a state representative in the Wyoming House of Representatives. He's a fourth generation Wyomingite, and we won't hold it against him that he's from Star Valley. But he was raised on a dairy farm in a family of 12. He put himself through college. He worked for 35 years as an engineer and manager in the oil and gas industry. He was first elected to the Wyoming Legislature in 2020, where he you still serve there, as vice chairman of the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee, and as co-chairman of the Second Federal Natural Resources Management Committee. Scott's retired, lives on a ranch near Seedskadee Wildlife Refuge. He's the father of 7 children and has 8 grandchildren, with 3 more on order. So awesome. And so we'll welcome you, Scott, to come. So at the end, we're going to have this microphone. He's going to go through his presentation, and then at the end, if there's any questions, so we are recording this so that maybe you know somebody who wasn't able to be here. He's going to put it onto his social media somehow. We'll get that information out there so people can hear the presentation, and we'll be able to do that. So that's a good thing. And so if you have any questions, then we'll have you come here so people will be able to hear what they are.
Thank you, Doug. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you this evening. And tonight, you're my heroes, because you're here because you want to get involved. You want to preserve our liberties and our freedoms and protect our country from federal overreach. So I am so excited to have you here so that we can talk a little bit about this and what each of us can do to protect future generations from federal overreach. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I want to start with a little history story. And so, Rebecca, we go to that first slide. So this was back during the Revolutionary War, May of 1780. It was called the New England Dark Day. So we know what happened, but they didn't know at the time. But it got very dark during the middle of the day, to the point where they had to light candles to see. The chickens actually went back to roost because it got so dark. But what happened is on the East Coast, of course, they have fog coming in off of the ocean, off from the east. And a big fog bank came in. And at the same time, a big wall of smoke came from Canadian wildfires, which we had just this last summer. But that came from the west. And they met right over New England. And as the smoke mingled and mixed with the fog, it got very heavy and just settled down over all of the New England area. George Washington actually records this in his diaries when this happened. And people thought it was Judgment Day. They thought it was the end of the world. And so, next slide. The Connecticut legislature was in session at this time. They were writing the new state constitution that they were hoping to have after the Revolutionary War. And of course, with it getting dark and they thought it was the Judgment Day, everyone wanted to adjourn and go home to be with their families. And Abraham Davenport got up, and this is what he said. He said, "I am against adjournment. The day of judgment is either approaching or it is not. If it is not, there is no cause for an adjournment. If it is, I choose to be found doing my duty. I wish, therefore, that candles might be brought." This Abraham Davenport wanted to be found doing the right thing if Judgment Day did occur. And that's, I think, what we all want. John F. Kennedy in 1960 told this same story. And at the end he said, quote, "I hope in a dark and uncertain period in our own country that we too may bring candles to help light our country's way," unquote. So that's what I want to emphasize here tonight. Sometimes when you fight against the federal government, it seems like an undauntable task, that we can't fight against the federal government. We'll never win. And when this resource management plan was brought out in August of this summer, I felt that way myself. I felt like they're being heavy-handed, and no matter what we did to push back, they were still going to approve it. I don't know if any of you went to the public comment. I put quotes around public comment, but the public comment meeting they had in Lyman in September. Did anybody attend that? So some friends of mine got there early and they set up chairs for the public comments. And when the BLM employees got there, they took the chairs down and locked them in a closet. And it's not because the BLM employees here in Wyoming didn't want any input from the public, but they were instructed from Washington, D.C. not to allow any public comments. It was basically just to show them the maps without getting any feedback. And so when I heard these things, and I went to the one in Rock Springs, there was 500 to 1,000 people there, same way. No public comment taken. They just had the maps shown, displayed around the room. They didn't, because it just felt like they were going to be heavy-handed with this whole thing. And so I felt like we were in a dark future. But towards the end of my comments, I'll tell you that there are some candles out there. The BLM is starting to soften up. I met with the state director just last Monday, a couple of days ago. We had a committee meeting in Cheyenne, and they had some news that, not tremendous, but they're softening a little bit. So let's get started here. This is as soon as that comes up, Rebecca. So this is the Rock Springs resource area for the BLM, and it doesn't follow county lines, and so it includes part of Uinta, Sweetwater, Sublette, and Lincoln counties. So you can see there's a little bit of Uinta County down here, some of the Sublette County up there, and a little bit of Carbon County on the side. But then there's the Kemmer resource area that encompasses a lot of the area around Evanston, the Pinedale resource area, Lander, and Rollins. So supposedly every 10 to 15 years, they update their policies. And it was time for the Rock Springs to be updated 13 years ago. So what they did is they got all of the people in the BLM into a meeting. This is 13 years ago. And they wanted to create bookends. One as far right as they could think of going towards conservation or preservation, I like to call it. And then one to the far right, which would be extracting more minerals and resources from this BLM resource area than they currently do. So next slide, please. So they came up with these 4 alternatives. Alternative A would be to do it, just continue doing their management the way they have always done it. Alternative B is as far to the conservation of preservation as they could imagine. Alternative C is the other bookend on the other side. And they got together and they worked on those 2 for 40 hours, 1 week, because they thought this was just bookends for their process. And then they spent 6 years on alternative D, which is somewhere in the middle. And this is where they worked with the collaborative agencies, the county commissioners. They worked with Soil Conservation Service. They worked with the Wyoming Game and Fish. The Wyoming Game and Fish said they spent thousands of hours working on this alternative D to come up with a science-based alternative that would govern the management practices for the next 10 years in this land of resource area. They worked with the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, with the Wyoming Mining Association, the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. So everyone was at the table for 6 years working on this plan. And when they got done, the last meeting was held in July of 2020. When they got done, this alternative D was their preferred alternative. This was the plan that everyone thought would be proposed. And it was sent to Washington, and everybody went home, and that was right during COVID, so it was pretty quiet. And then in August of this year, the BLM released their proposal as alternative B. And everyone was shocked. Even the BLM employees were shocked. And so I don't want to disparage any of the local BLM employees. They are good people. We rub shoulders with them every day. I've worked for 30 years with these local BLM employees. This is coming from the top. This is from Washington. That's where it got changed from D to B. And even the employees here were very, very surprised. That was not what they envisioned happening. That's not what they invested 6 years of their life to come up with. But it's pure politics. It does not follow science. And so I had the opportunity of flying this area with some government agencies, including the Wyoming Game and Fish, and they are opposed to this alternative B because it does not follow science. It will not allow them access to be able to manage the wildlife like they should. And so they are adamant in their opposition. In fact, I've got a copy of the letter that they wrote to the BLM opposing this. So let me give you a rundown of what it does. Alternative B will reduce the gross domestic product of Wyoming by $1 billion a year. That's with a B. The whole state, our GDP is about $40 billion. This will drop it by $1 billion. So in the document, now this document is 1,350 pages. So it's not easy to digest, and I gotta admit, I've read a lot of it, but I haven't got through all of it yet. But it says in there that they expect that we will lose over 3,000 jobs with this new policy. That's in a population of 35,000 total population. 3,000 jobs, that's gonna affect our economy, affect a lot of families in this region. It says that it will restrict ranching, livestock, grazing. It would reduce the grazing allotment by over 7,600 animal units. And it actually says in the document, it says this will drive some ranchers out of business. It says ranching for some will be unsustainable without that grazing. It increases what they call an area of critical environmental concern. And that area of critical environmental concern is very, very powerful. But of the 3.6 million acres that they manage, half of it will be areas of critical environmental concern. And so that gives them latitude to do a lot more restrictions by designating that. ORVs will be severely limited with this plan. Now, after it was released in August, they pulled back the travel management plan. And so I know one of the BLM employees that worked on this plan, and he's since retired, and he said when this came out, he said, Scott, you need to look at those maps for that travel management plan, because half of the roads and trails will be closed down. There's 36,000 miles of roads in this resource area, and they will close down half of them. What they want to do is any road or trail that doesn't have a deed, a registered right-of-way, will be closed. And a lot of those ranchers that live in this resource area management have been using an access road to their ranch for 50, 80 years, whatever, but they've never gotten a recorded right-of-way for their road into their ranch. So they will lose access to their home. And if you go to the appendix on this 1,350 pages, Appendix B says that with the preferred alternative B, there are no modifications, waivers, or exceptions. So what that means is if there's a rancher out there that loses access to his home because there is no deeded right-of-way, and he goes to the local BLM employees and says, hey, I can't get to my ranch anymore because you've closed the road. The local BLM employees have no jurisdiction, have no way to give him a waiver. That has to go to Washington, D.C. in order to get permission for that right-of-way. So I'll show you some maps. Much of this area is going to be closed to new rights-of-way as well. So it reduces mineral development. Oil and gas, it reduces it by 74%. Coal, it absolutely shuts down coal leasing. No coal leasing. Trona, it shuts down about 50,000 acres of Trona. I'll show you that as well. If some of you that work in the Trona business know of the snowman, they call it. So it's an area where they've identified Trona deposits, and it's kind of in the shape of a snowman on the map. But it reaches into this area, so it will limit some of the Trona development in the future. Okay, some of this is pretty wild, and I'll get to that later, but let's go to the next slide, Rebecca. What I've done here is I've gone into their document, and I've compared the different maps for you, so you can see a comparison. On my right, your left, is alternative A, which is how it is currently managed. And then on this side, on your right, is the proposed alternative B, which is they're proposing. So this is mineral leasing. So you can see green means proposal to withdraw from mineral entry. So taking away no mineral leasing in the green. So you can see there's a little bit of green up in this area, but afterwards there's a lot of green. Now here in the middle, that's called the checkerboard. You recall that when they wanted to build a transcontinental railroad, the Union Pacific they wanted some more revenue, more assurances for this great expenditure of building a railroad. So Abraham Lincoln gave every other section of land for 20 miles on each side of the railroad to the railroad to provide incentive for them to build this railroad. So that's called the checkerboard right there in the center. And so every other section is private, intermingled with the BLM. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for the BLM, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. If they restrict rights of way, even if you own land out there in the middle, you can't get to it without going through BLM. So they kind of lock that up as well. So it doesn't show it here as being locked up to minerals, but essentially they will by locking up the right-of-way in that checkerboard. So you can see how much the change is for mineral leasing. Next slide, Rebecca. Solid leasable minerals. This is coal. So over here, this is how it's currently leased. The rust color is closed to coal. So you can see they're basically shutting down any coal leasing in these 3.6 million acres of land. Next slide, please. Fluid minerals, this would be oil and gas. So you can see that with the red, they're shutting down a lot of the oil and gas leasing. Now, recognize in this area, this is one of the major sources of income for the state of Wyoming. The economy from oil and gas and coal and trona, we rely a lot on that in southwest Wyoming. And even where it's not rust colored, you see green, and that says no surface occupancy. So how are you going to be able to go in and drill a well if there's no surface occupancy? Now, what's the definition of no surface occupancy? What it means is you cannot be on the ground more than 1 hour in a 24-hour period of time. So let's, as these roads get shut down, some of our hunters and recreationists, they think this is going to be great. It's going to be wonderful hunting in this whole 3.6 million acres. But as they close down more than half of the roads, if you don't have horses, you won't be able to take your ORV, your four-wheel drive vehicle, you won't be able to get in there. But some of them will say, well, I'll just go in on horses. That'll be fine. I'll go the 50 to 100 miles to get in there on horses. But no surface occupancy means you can't set up a tent because you can't occupy the land more than 1 hour a day. So there's some things we need to be aware of that they're trying to do to get us off of the land. Okay, next slide, Rebecca. Rights of way. This is a big thing right there. So right now, here on your left, they can administer rights of way and give those rights of way to good causes. Of course, you have to make sure you're protecting the environment and doing your due diligence. But over here, you can see with the rust color, there will be no rights of way given. So if you have some oil and gas leases, so the Jonah field, you've all heard of the Jonah field, one of the largest natural gas deposits in the United States. They've got another development that they want to do called the naturally pressurized Lance formation that's just to the south. And it's right in this area, but they're saying with this proposal, there'll be no rights of way given. So how do they lay a pipeline? How do they bring power into those locations? So those 3,600 wells that they're hoping to drill to be the next Jonah field, this will prevent that from happening or make it very, very difficult. So rights of way is a big thing. And like I said, in Appendix B, it says that any variance, waiver, or modification has to be approved in Washington, D.C. There's none allowed out here. Next slide, please. This is, if you're a hunter, you need to pay attention to this one. So they pulled back the actual map of the off-road highway use. They have a map. They know what roads they're going to be closing, but they said they will release that at a future time and deal with this travel management plan in a future time. Trust us. But you can see that just to get a hint of what they're proposing is more than half of the roads will be limited so you cannot utilize them. So if you use this area in the past, there's a good chance you won't be able to get there and use it in the future. I used to go with the Boy Scouts into sand dunes area, and we'd camp overnight and play in the sand dunes. This will prevent a lot of that. I've hunted most of this area. It'll be a vastly different hunt, and I'm too old to walk in there 50 miles now. So it may prevent us from enjoying the wildlife. Weed management. there will be no mechanical or biological spraying of weeds. So no noxious weed management. Our weed and pest group will not be able to get in there and manage weeds. And you all know what happens if you don't take care of weeds, and the wind blows and everybody downstream suffers from it. I live right below Sietskity National Wildlife area. They don't allow any weed spraying in there. And so I'm just downriver from it, and I have white tops and weeds everywhere. And our weed and pest department in Sweetwater County wants to get in there, but they won't let them in. So they end up spraying on the outside of the wildlife area, but that's reactionary. You're not solving the problem. So that's the way it'll be over there. Coyotes, there'll be no hunting of coyotes in this area, no predatory control. Fire management, if you can't get on a road to get in there and control a wildfire, how do you manage it? So that's one thing I want to get across is if you're a hunter or you like to recreate, this will impact you. So be aware of that. All right, next slide, Rebecca. Where is this coming from? Did this just happen in August? This is a map from 1992, published by the United Nations. 1992. See all the red? And what it says for red is little to no human contact. Little to no human use. We humans have a carbon footprint. They're trying to limit that. What they want to do, and recognize this is not the United States that put this out, this is the United Nations. What they want to do is revert this land in red to what's called a wild land. Now there's a difference between a wilderness area and a wild land. We have the Wind River Wilderness Area. That is land that has never been disturbed and is preserved as a wilderness. A wild land is one that's been disturbed, but then returned to its historical state. So in this 1,350-page document put out by the BLM, they said they want to return this area, large portion of it, to its historical condition. But they don't define what historical means. Is that what it was 5 years ago? Is that what it was 50 years ago? Or was that what it was like before man ever showed up out here? So this started back almost 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. And we've heard of Biden's 30 by 30 plan, that he wants the federal government to own 30% of the land by the year 2030. Right now they own 26 or 27%. So it's not a far stretch of the imagination for them to get to the 30%. They just bought a 30,000 acre ranch over by Casper, so they're making inroads to that 30 by 30. But I think this is a bigger agenda than what we realize. This isn't just a little thing that's coming out in Rock Springs, Wyoming, that shouldn't matter to people in Evanston or in Pinedale or anywhere else. This is a blueprint of what's coming everywhere from our federal government. I have had discussions with legislators from Utah and Idaho, and they are watching very closely. They've told me they're watching us to see how we handle this, because they recognize this is what's coming to them in the future. We're just the first ones. In Wyoming, the federal government owns 48% of our state. Utah, they own almost 70%. So they're worried about that. And in fact, down in Moab, Utah, they're already starting to shut roads down. And if any of you recreate down there on spring break, that'll have a huge impact. That tourism in Moab is a $4 billion commodity, $4 billion. And they're starting to shut some of those trails down in Moab. Since this resource management plan came out in August, they have already started putting out signs on some of the roads in this area, that the roads are closed. And they've actually ticketed 2 hunters already for being on roads that they say are closed. So it's coming. And we need to do what we can do to prevent that from coming. So I want to finish up here so we can have plenty of time for comments and questions, but what can you do? So their timeline was to have this all wrapped up with the public comment period by next week. And then they would take it back to Washington, make some adjustments or look through all the comments. They would publish a revised draft document in the early part of next year. By law, they have to give our governor 60 days to comment on that final draft. And they planned on having this finalized by June of next year. That's how fast they were pushing it through. Now, because of what we've been doing, they have extended the comment period until January, so that pushes it back a little bit. But they're also relaxing some of the things, and they're starting to listen to us. I got to tell you, when it came out in August, the end of August, I was depressed. I didn't think we were going to have any success. But we're having some success because of people like you getting involved. Now recognize, as you submit a comment, there's probably 15 people from the East Coast and overseas that are supplying comments that are in favor of this. In fact, the BLM has told me that they're getting more comments in favor of this resource management proposal than they are against it. Wyoming is a pretty small state, but they've opened it up comments for the whole world. And they said that a comment coming from some foreign country has as much validity as one coming from Evanston, Wyoming. But they said also, they've cautioned us, if your comment has to have some sound logic behind it. You just can't send in a comment and say, I don't like this, or this is not right. You have to have a reason. So when you send in a comment, have some specific items that you want to address. So I've sent in a number of comments through various committees that I work with in the legislature, but I'm going to send a comment in about camping with the Boy Scouts on sand dunes. That is something that we develop young men and young women with, was camping experiences. And this will severely restrict that. I'm also going to mention some of the areas where I hunt and point them out by road. The Bar X Road or the Bitter Creek Road, this is where I go into my hunting area. And maybe show them by lats and longs where my hunting area is. And tell them that this is something that I enjoy going and seeing wildlife and hunting in that area. But be specific. If you work in the oil and gas business, it's going to reduce employment by 3,000 people. And you can put that down there. If you work in the coal business, this will severely restrict Wyoming's revenue if there's no more coal leases being given out. If you work in the trona business, the future, some of these greenfield development trona mines, they're down there in that area that they want to mine our trona, and that's a huge employer for Southwest Wyoming. So as you give your comments, be very specific as you can. I don't give you just a form letter to fill out and cut and paste, because they said if you do that, they won't allow that to be counted as a comment. It has to be specific. So, Rebecca, have you got the information we need to show them how to get to that comment period? So if you just Google BLM Rock Springs RMP, it'll take you to the site.
If you want to take your phone, take a picture of that.
Yeah.
And that'll let you know you're on the right path.
That's pretty hard to type all of that in. So for me, with my fat fingers, I just type in BLM Rock Springs RMP. RMP stands for Resource Management Plan, and it'll take you into this site right there. And then on the right side, there's a little green button that says Participate Now. You can see that on the right, on your left, I'm sorry. So you hit that button, it says, so once you get to that, this is the site you're going to get to. And you say you want to participate now, and that'll take you into the comment section. Now, I started off talking about the candle, the dark day, and Abraham Davenport that asked for candles to be brought so that they can continue their work, because he wanted to be, if it was Judgment Day, he wanted to be doing his duty. There's another author, I forget his name, but his last name was Nolan, but he said, ships are safest in the harbor, but that's not what ships are designed for. So we, as citizens of the state of Wyoming, and specifically here in southwest Wyoming, we can sit in the harbor. We can go home and sit in our easy chair and complain and worry about it, but that's not what we are designed for. You're not here because you're the type of person that sits and does nothing. You're here because you want to be a factor in doing what's right. You're the type of people that will bring candles when the things get dark. You're the type of people that want to make a difference. You want to be involved because you care about the great state of Wyoming, you care about our freedoms, you care for future generations. That's why you're my heroes tonight, and I appreciate you being here. Now, I've rushed through this because I want to have time for you to ask questions. It can be about this. It can be about other items that are important to you. Maybe it's property taxes. Maybe it's the Pacific Power rate increase. Maybe it's about parental rights. Anything that you want to talk about, I'm here to visit with you now. So I would invite you to come to the microphone because we're recording this, and we want to be able to hear your question.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. One of the questions I've had with this is I've done a little reading, is that I am reading that the Department of Interior, the BLM, are willing and ready to fight this thing in the court system tooth and nail. I'd like to know if you know anything about that or if that's just scuttlebutt.
Thank you, Joe, for that question. Monday we had the Attorney General in front of our committee, the Select Federal Natural Resources Management Committee. And we got to talk about these very things. What will the state do if and when it's approved? And you may have read that the legislature is proposing to appropriate $50 million to fight against the federal government in this and other situations of federal overreach. Now that has to go through the whole process before that actually becomes law, but that's what's proposed right now. And Bridget Hill, who is our Attorney General, she says they are preparing to litigate this. They will litigate it. Sometimes that's the only time the federal government listens to us is through the court system. And we have had some wins through the court system. Just recently, there was some oil and gas leases that were held up for a number of years, and a bunch of states sued the federal government over that, and we won. I just saw this week that the Gulf of Mexico, the federal government has not allowed any further leasing down there since Biden has been president, and that was litigated, and Biden lost. The federal government lost. They're going to have to lease some property down there. So the BLM is fully prepared to litigate this, and they have deep pockets, but we have the rule of law on our side. And so I fully, talking with the Petroleum Association of Wyoming, the Wyoming Minerals Association, the Stock Growers Association, they all are preparing to litigate as well from different avenues and different routes. So I think it will end up in litigation, but I'll tell you one of the things I fear, if this thing goes and is approved in this fashion, and it becomes law, and then we start litigating, and that litigation takes 2 or 3 years, what management policy will they use while we're litigating? They'll use this during that period of time. But Bridget Hill, our Attorney General, says they cannot sue until it's finalized. They can't sue an idea yet. So we're kind of in a catch-22 right there. But I had the opportunity of visiting with our state BLM director, Director Archuleta, and he goes to Washington, D.C. quite often. And I challenged him to take our concerns back to Washington, that we here in Wyoming who live in this area, and our living is based on federal government, that we are very concerned. And he says, oh, I know they are very concerned. I said, please take that back to Washington. Let them know. So he promised to do that. And he said that he fully believes, because of all of your involvement, he says that he believes they'll go back and come, and in the probably March time period, when the final draft comes out, it will not be as is right now. It'll be a little further towards the right. Now, how far? That's why we got to push. That's why we got to push. Good question. Thank you very much, Joe. Anyone else? Just sit right up here in front, Brent, so we know you're next.
Hi. On your maps, it gives us kind of a basic idea, but could you give us a better idea, like roads, like was that the LaBarge Creek Road? How much of Uintah County, is in that area that you're talking about?
Okay.
Okay.
Rebecca, could we go to it'd be the third slide. There. So here's the interstate right here. There's Superior, Farson, and Green River's right there. So this is the road down to Manila, and this is Lone Tree right here, coming over here to Lyman. So you can see, and this Trona, the snowman is actually right here and comes down into this area right here. So this new Trona mine will be mining right in this area here. Have you all heard about Project West? So that their mining field is right down in here. It's by buckboard, and then they're going to ship it up in a pipeline up close to Granger for processing. So this is going to impact Trona as well. And we've got enough reserves for, Brent, how many years? More than 150 years. I don't know. There's a lot of Trona here in this country. So do you get a feel for where we're at here now?
Is that the road that goes up to LaBarge? That's right there.
Right here is 370 going up, 372 going to LaBarge right here. Yeah. And this is the Farson cutoff right there, Highway 28. And there's the Lincoln County line right there. Brent? Commissioner, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hey, mine's more of a comment. We as commissioners have written multiple letters in reference to this because we're concerned that if this is in place, they're just going to go further west, and that's going to really impact Uintah County. So we've written letters, and in fact, on the letters we've written that have been sent, all three of commissioners have signed that, not just the chairman. So we're pushing hard against this as well.
And thank you so much we have to be united in this front, Commissioner. It's very, very important. And I talked with Kelly Lamborn, who is the district manager for the Kemmer field office, and asked her, what's she going to do when this comes to her field office? And she said she's not going to fight it. She says she'll retire before she fights this, because the people that live here realize what kind of an impact this will make on our livelihood. So she's not very supportive of that, and she works for the BLM. The BLM has good employees here in Wyoming. Many of them are my friends, your friends, They live and work amongst us. But their employer is requiring them to support this. And I asked the BLM, some of those in Cheyenne, will they have to hire more enforcement officers as they close all these roads and everything down? And they said they haven't got it in the budget yet, but it's something they have to consider. Now, if any of you have been on the National Forest and tried to drive off of the main roads on some of these trails with your ORV, there's not many opportunities, is there? A lot of it is closed. They got these big signs, no motorized vehicles. And some of them that are actually open, they have dates on the sign there. It says you can only travel from July 15th until 1st of September on that road, and then it gets closed. As you delve into this process, that's going to happen here too. So even if some of the roads are open, they may be closed for a better part of the year, because it says that it will be closed for, let me read the exact words that it says. Anything that is disruptive activity on big game critical winter ranges, migration corridors, or transactional habitats will be closed. And then it gives a bunch of dates. So if you look at all that, you got the elk calving, you've got the winter critical wintering for the wildlife, you got raptors' nests. You add all those up, and it will be closed. Well, let me say, it will be open from August 1st until November 1st. That's the only time some of these roads will actually be open, August 1st till November 1st. So, yeah, it's open once in a while. Any other questions?
Who's making these decisions, and are they elected officials?
Boy, I wish I could have been in that room when they made this decision to go with alternative B. It was not in Wyoming. Everyone here in Wyoming assured me that this did not happen in Wyoming. They sent, when this plan, after being worked on for 6 years with all these different agencies, local people, and they sent it to Washington, and it came back, the local BLM people said they were astonished. The change, that it went from D, which is a collaborative approach, to B. Now, it was ready to go out to be released in 2020, but they held on to it. Now, why did they hold on to it until 2023? Who was in office in 2020? So they held on to it. And why were they trying to get this all approved by June of next year? I don't know those as facts. I'm just there's a reason that it came out this way, and I think it was politics. There was no science based. Someone back there in Washington made this decision, and I don't know who they were. Thank you for the question. I wonder that too. Other questions? Yes, please.
So you made a comment that you're going to submit another comment. So can we make more than one comment as long as it's about different topics?
Yes, you can
Different
put in
reasons.
as many as you can. Just make them very specific and not just cut and paste so everybody does the same thing.
So that would be wise then, like if we had one concern, make one comment about that and then come back at another time and make another comment about a different concern.
And those would count as 2 comments, yes.
And then also, I know I got a newsletter from Harriet Hageman, and it has links on it and articles. I don't know if that's of use for you to know. So you probably know.
So Harriet, our representative, Harriet Hageman, she is a rock star in this. She got an amendment passed just last week and she got all of the representatives, not all of them voted for it, but the majority voted to attach that amendment that says that they oppose this. Now that is a huge shot. That is a huge win for us, that it passed the U.S. House of Representatives basically as a no confidence vote for this. And I think that's why when I met with the BLM on Monday, they're starting to soften up. I felt that they're softening up. We're making some inroads. And I asked them, okay, Scott Heiner can put in a comment, and okay, it's very specific, like you say, and that's a comment. But then the Wyoming Legislature can put in a comment, a letter. The governor can put in a comment. Our congressional representatives can put in their comments. Do they all weigh the same? And they told me, frankly, these comments from individuals are, don't weigh near what they said. The one that makes the big difference is the governor. And the governor has been pretty silent for quite some time about this, but we've been pushing him from the legislative perspective, trying to get him out in front, and he is getting there now. He's starting to speak up, and he's put together a task force to receive comments, and he's got this task force going around and helping people with their comments and understanding. So our governor is rising to the occasion. He's getting involved because he has the most say. We have to have him engaged. Him and our attorney general need to be engaged, because when the final draft comes out, he's the only one that gets to comment on that. There won't be more public hearings like we had them anyway, but there will not be any public hearings. It's just a final draft, and the governor gets to comment.
What gives the United Nations the power to rule over us? And why is the federal government allowing that to happen? And can the states have any say?
That is an excellent question. I appreciate that very much. Our federal government only has the power that we the people give to it. In the Declaration of Independence, it says we the people. Now this was a foreign concept back in the 1700s, because all the power at that time came through the king. And all power resided in the king. And in the Declaration of Independence, it states that all power comes from God through the people, and the government only has the power that the people give to it. So unfortunately, we've let the federal government take more power than what we should. The United Nations, same way. We're a member of the United Nations as a country, but we only allow them to do what we want to allow them. Unfortunately, some people in the administration want to have a world order, and that comes through possibly the United Nations. So they only have authority over our land by what we give them. So we've got to continue fighting that fight. Let's protect our freedoms. We are a sovereign nation. Let's keep it sovereign. Let's not give up any more power to the United Nations than what we want to give to them. So good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
My name is David Bennett. I'm on the school board here in Evanston. I was a high school principal for a lot of years, and I'm mad as hell, and I want to do something more than I should do. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are too. We heard about this in a group that I attend on a Saturday morning called Choose Liberty. They brought this up. You know, the hardest thing for us as individuals is to believe that our government can do these things to us. And it seems like it's never ending. Every time we turn around, there's some other knife they're going to stick at us. I want to thank you for your time, Scott, and I guess my concern is two things. Where are our reps? Are they here? Berger and who's the other one? Schuler. You know, I just wonder where these people that have our votes are worried about our freedom. And my other question is Wyoming the first state, the trial basis for this happening? And if this passes, is every county in the state gonna get hit with the same thing? Is that coming down the pike? How did we get to be the first guinea pigs? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. This is the first resource management plan with this radical of a preservation. So yes, Wyoming gets to be the first one. Now, why is that?
Because there's no people here.
That was one of the first things I thought of. If they want to make this wild lands with no human contact, don't pick New York City for that. Pick somewhere where there's only 560,000 people. And southwest Wyoming, there's only 35,000 people in southwest Wyoming. So there's an agenda out there. Why did they pick Wyoming? I'm sure they through the smoke and mirrors, there's a good reason. But they don't realize how Wyoming cowboys up. And we don't just lay down. We are ships that don't stay in the harbor when the storm rages. We're going to be out there on the seas fighting. And that's why you are here, because you love Wyoming. And you're planting a tree under whose shade you may not enjoy, but you're planting it for future generations, and you're going to preserve that tree. So that's why you are my heroes. A couple more. Now, I've got all night, and I'll stay here as long as I have questions, but if you get to where you have to go somewhere, just walk out. I won't be offended.
So, come November next year, if we get a good president in there, the good president, if this goes through, can it be undone?
You think the same way I do. So if we get a different president, he can do an executive action and overturn this. But then what happens? It gets litigated. There will be pushback. So in the meantime, there may be a federal judge that puts a stay on his executive action. And so in the meantime, while they fight this out in court, what will be the policy? And so if they can fight it longer and keep it in court longer, this policy reigns until that point, until it gets through litigation. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but there's some smarter people than I am that are thinking about how to achieve their end goal. And they've been working on this, as you see from the United Nations map, they've been working on it for 30 years. So they've got some plans in place. We just need to fight. And sometimes we lose a battle, but we're going to win the war.
I wouldn't know if I'm smart. Well, I'm pretty smart, but to ask the right question. So like with the farmers or the ranchers, and they can't even get to their land, then does the government come in with eminent domain, and or how does that work? You just out of home?
So the way I read it is they will have to apply for a right-of-way, and it's
Not going to be given.
it won't be allowed because no rights-of-way being given. So they will have to go and ask for a waiver or exception to Washington, D.C.
And they're not going to get that.
I cannot say. But the way Appendix B is written, it says no waivers, exclusions, exceptions, no waivers. Let me look at the wording here. No waiver, modifications, or, okay, Appendix B says exceptions, modifications, and waivers. And it says under B, there is none. So that means the local people, as good people as they are, they won't have the authority to say, yeah, we'll give you a right-of-way for your land. So it'll have to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm sure the Wyoming Stock Growers Association and Farm Bureau will help with some situation like that. But hopefully they can get access for them. I hope we don't lose ranchers because they can't get into the ranch.
What do you think the ultimate purpose of this whole thing is?
No human contact. Wildlands. People in the East Coast that have never been to Wyoming, they would like Wyoming just to revert back to the way it was before humans came here. They would like to have wolves running around and bison and wild horses. They think very poorly for us for not, rounding up these wild horses and not allowing them to, they're overpopulating here in southwest Wyoming. But they've never been here, but that's their vision of Wyoming, is just a Wild West. They want to return it to Wild West. Please. You have, Please. Doug?
I'm wondering if you would agree with this. So the universities are teaching a lot of things that are not, based on support the Constitution and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of minds that we've got a whole population that is out of touch with reality, the way I look at it. But anyway, so I'm thinking we got this Marxist mentality going on in our nation. And so, yeah, we are the test tube right here, and that's why it's important for us to really get on fire, and we need to take this information, not sit on it. We need to be disciples, in a sense, and help other people understand, get all the comments out there that we can, so that people can understand and really push back, because I think what you see is how they work is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you have like the Target deal that went on with that, where they had the trans clothing for kids in the front of the store. Well, people pushed back, but what happened? They put it in the back of the store. And so they push as much as they can into, forward, and then lose as little as they possibly can. And what I think we have to just really hit them as hard as we can is, every one of us, if we don't do something and try to encourage many other people to do something, and then they'll understand we're serious. But otherwise, they're always gaining. They're always gaining 2 steps forward, 1 step back, half step back, and then we think we won something. But so we have to really take it serious that there's a battle going on. There's a battle going on. I'm really concerned about our children. I'm a great-grandpa now. And, man, I look at his little face, and I think, what is he going to face, And unless the Lord returns, we talked about they thought it was the return of the Lord. I really think we're close to that, too. So I think we need to be living for God and standing up for truth. So
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that, and I agree wholeheartedly. There is no greater call than a teacher. What a great career for a teacher that is willing to spend their time molding and sharing knowledge with our children. Unfortunately, many of the universities throughout the United States have become a petri dish for liberalism. They're more focused on gender identity and all sorts of concepts that they're not focusing on education like they used to. But I appreciate your comments. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I had the opportunity of being in Dallas here about 10 days ago and listened to Glenn Beck, and he talked about the Israeli war going on right now. And he asked a probing question: if you lived during the Nazi period of time, what would you have done? What would you have done? We've read a lot of stories over the past 80 years about people that, saved the Jews and put their lives in peril as they stood up for right. And he says, now, our generations, we get to see what we're going to do. We're faced with the same question. What will you do when faced with evil versus good? So thank you. Yes.
So can you tell me if the BLM is just a government agency similar to like the ATF or the EPA or any of these government agencies? And if that is, you know, the case that they are just an agency, there have been a lot of recent legislation with Second Amendment legislation where some very successful litigation has taken place where lower courts have said that government agencies cannot make law. Only the legislatures can make law. So it just is a little bit mind-boggling to me how these government agencies can willy-nilly come out and make law without going through our legislatures. And so I know what you're saying earlier. It said this could take years and it could go through the courts and years and yada yada. But is anybody looking at that angle?
So, very, very good question. So there's a difference between law and policy. So Congress or the state legislature passes a law, and then many times we leave it up to the department to write the actual rules of that law. And so they get to interpret it. So the Congress passed a law that this public lands had to be administered for multi-use. This is back in the 70s they passed that law, that it had to be for the best economic value and multiple use. So just about almost a year ago, the BLM came out and said that conservation is a use. And we didn't do anything about that statement. But they said conservation is a use. Now this was an inroad for what they're doing here. Because now they can say with this conservation and preservation, they're following law by changing policy and saying conservation is a use. So what this will allow, by making conservation as a multi-use, they can take a grazing lease and rather than lease it to a rancher, they can lease it to some multi-billionaire for conservation and kick the livestock off of there and say this is just going to be managed for conservation. And the BLM is saying they follow that law that was passed in the 70s. So yeah, they make little steps, like Doug was saying. They're making little steps all the time with a bigger agenda in play.
So I guess we have to make little steps to undo this.
So what we got to do, one thing, we got to be aware of what's going on. And that's why you're here, so you can be aware of what's going on. And then we make those little steps. And we fight against it. I do not think the BLM thought that little old Wyoming was pushed back as much as we're pushing back on this. They didn't expect it. But I am proud of the citizens of the state of Wyoming because we are pushing back. Not only in Evanston, not only in Rock Springs, but they're pushing back in Sheridan and Cody, in Casper. Everybody's pushing on this. And I don't think the BLM realized how we are a closely knit state with common values that we would push back this hard. Thank you.
I used to be a teacher, so I asked lots of questions. Well, first of all, what about the western states, like the governors? I mean, isn't there like a coalition of the western states? I mean, is there some way that
Yes, there's the Western State Governor Association, and our governor is the president of that. They just had a meeting in Jackson last week.
Have they discussed this? Are they, I mean, that's one great way to get more comments is to get people from some of these other states involved.
So the Western States Coalition includes Colorado and some western states, and not all of them are as conservative. And I mentioned that the BLM is receiving more positive comments than negative. So for the Western States Governors Association to come out with a statement opposing this would be pretty difficult because you have some governors that are in favor of it. So no, they haven't come out with a statement at this time.
And they haven't, our governor hasn't asked them for support or help? Or,
I do not know that.
okay. A little off topic. How's the progress with the power bill going, with Rocky Mountain Power?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. So they have taken testimony, And now the Public Service Commission will weigh all those things, and I've talked to some of the commissioners, and of course they cannot answer anything at this point, but they will weigh that and then decide what they will allow. But that is, there's some things that need to be fixed, because we're hearing different stories from the power company, but I believe a lot of this rate increase is not because they're trying to keep the power plants going, but they want to pay for this $10 billion of power lines that they're building to take our power to the West Coast. When the wind blows, you see all these wind turbines being built in Wyoming and solar farms, but you don't see, they're not building them over there in California. We're their industrial backyard. So when it came time to build a nuclear power plant, and I'm in favor of the nuclear power plant, don't get me wrong, but do you see them building it in Washington or in Oregon? No, they want it in Wyoming, because they're in favor of it, but not in their backyard. So yeah, we are obligated to, because of this agreement we have with the other 6 states, we are obligated to pay 15% of their costs. But what they're building right now, I don't agree with, because they're building power lines to take power outside the state. So I think we're getting saddled. And additionally, we are paying for some carbon taxes in the state of Washington. They have a coal-fired power plant there that they're charging a carbon tax on, and we have to pay a portion of that, which is, I don't think that's right. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what the Public Service Commission comes back with, but they have heard a lot of testimony. And the legislature is working on some things. We might have to change some laws going forward. Please.
I think mine is kind of like on what she was talking about, is these western states around us, are they on board with what's going on here? And like you said, they're not all like we are, but they're gonna be, whether they like it or not, and then it's gonna be too late. You got Montana, I'm quite sure probably South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, Utah. You don't know about some of these other states, but I'm quite sure they'd probably be on board with it. Now Colorado, I don't know where they come from, so.
So Utah has 71% of their land is federally owned.
Okay, they're gonna go after them too, aren't they?
Wyoming is 48, Nevada is 80%.
So
Idaho is 63%, Montana is only 35%.
still there's a lot of Montanans that are Western people, and they are.
So
But, are these, I guess, your governors or the people there, they letting the people in them states know what's going on here? Because it's gonna come to them too.
yes, the legislators, I can tell you this, the legislators know. And I've talked to the legislators from a number of those states, and they're hoping that we push that back and win, because they see it as a blueprint of what's coming their direction.
Okay, their legislators need to let them go on and have a deal like you got going here and get those people out to give out comments and see what's going to happen to them.
Right. Thank you. You've been very patient.
Thank you. So this kind of greatly impacts our natives, our homesteaders, our mountain men, our people who live off of the land. And I look at those red lines and I kind of think they're kind of choking off every town from each other. What if the UN wanted to march in here? How easy would it be for them to take control of those red lines and cut us all off from each other, do whatever they want?
Thank you for that comment. The United States fights wars on other lands other than the United States. There's a reason that happens. That's because of the Second Amendment. We need to preserve our Second Amendment rights. No foreign country would risk coming into the United States because of our Second Amendment rights. We need to preserve that. That is one of the most important amendments that we have. Thank you.
So I've kind of got two questions here. Number one, why does the federal government own so much of Wyoming and these other states? Why isn't it our land and our state? That's question number one. Question number two, on this property tax. In order to comment on property tax, I have to be a registered voter and I have to be a homeowner, or I can't comment on it. I've lost my rights because I've been to prison. So I'm now a person that has taxation without representation because I'm a property owner, but I can't have a vote on it. So my question is, why can somebody in New York City or in another country have a bigger vote than me who lives in Wyoming about what goes on in Wyoming?
You bring up a very good point there. I hadn't thought about that, how you're taxed without representation. As a felon, you can't vote.
Yep.
So you're right. That is interesting.
Against the Constitution, I believe.
That's a very interesting concept. I hadn't considered that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Now, what was the first question?
How come Wyoming doesn't own
Wyoming? Why is there so much federal land? So that is a big topic. A lot of the states that, when they became a state in the Union, they were given that land. The United States gave them the land, and they sold it off. So that's why Nebraska doesn't have a lot of federal land. Nebraska has a lot of federal minerals, but not federal land. North and South Dakota, Colorado, so they don't have as much federal land. When these later states came into the Union, like Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, at that point in time, the government decided they wanted to keep a hold of that land, and they didn't give it to the states as originally agreed upon. So that's a contention. It's called the Sagebrush Act, where some states want to get together and assert those rights to have ownership of the federal land. So that's a bigger cause. Any other questions? Joe.
I just want to ask one more, and that is that from what I'm hearing from you tonight, the best thing I can do is go to that site and put in my comment or comments, make sure that they contain substance and aren't just general complaints. And then the other thing that I think I'm hearing you say, or should we do, is should we be sending our comments to our governor to make sure he knows, even though I know he's supportive, that he knows that there's 560,000 people out there that are definitely supportive of this. Am I hearing it? Or is there more?
Joe, if I couldn't have said that better. Yes, exactly. That's the citizen involvement right now, is by providing comments and copying the governor, I think would be in our benefit. Yes. I think Doug's getting ready to close her down, so we better get these questions.
Okay. So, I guess my question is, we know the government has trouble with having enough revenue to cover what's going out. Do they have a proposal to make up for the lost revenue in grazing leases, oil and gas leases, mineral leases? I mean, even I work in the trona industry. If this affected me and I lost my job, I wouldn't be able to pay income taxes. And so there's going to be a lot of loss of revenue. Do they have a plan to make up for that?
Okay, so I am not qualified enough to speak on this. Is there any financial guys in here? Works in the stock market? Have you heard of an NAC? So you'll have to put your tin foil hats on for this one. But they're trying to get conservation companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And then people can buy stock in those conservation companies. and they figure that this is a $112 trillion business. So I don't fully understand this, but that's a way to monetize conservation and use it to pay for some of the federal government lost revenue. But I don't understand it. I had my tinfoil hat on and I didn't get everything about that. But there are some things afoot, and this is just starting right now, where they're trying to look up NAC. It's a financial instrument they're trying to get listed on the New York Stock Exchange that can actually hold conservation.
So that's commodity.
Yeah. I don't want to scare you, but it's kind of far-fetched right now, I think. There's nothing better than good hard work. Miners